During the outbreak, the range of activities of most people is very small. As a result, the communication networks created by computers and mobile phones have been brought into full play. Helmut Rosa, a German socialist, said the outbreak meant a forced deceleration at the social level. On the one hand, people are locked up indoors and isolated. On the other hand, relationships become suspicious because of the long-term security and loss of trust between people. We spend time on the screen. America spends an average of 11 hours a day. And we send message via email, search, Twitter, like, and text. Even if we don't type, machine record our scores, clicks, actions, and moves. So, in order to learn more about the current state of the social industry, we invited Richard Seymour, the author of the Twittering Machine, to listen to his view through a remote connection.
So, the Twittering machine. It isn't about hard drives and software, it's about writers and writing. And that's going to be quite an important distinction to bear in mind, indeed a quite important category. It's an industrialized system of writing, in fact, the world's first ever mass, open-air, collective writing experiment. And obviously under conditions of lockdown and crisis and emergency, it's one that we're all much more dependent on than we might normally be. But even then, it abides by the same rules and structures. It's actually quite a strange system of writing, underwritten, as it were, by systems of digital writing that actually pay no heed whatsoever to phonetic or semantic properties of, alphabetic writing. So everything that we see on the internet is, if you like, it's an abstract representation of far more complex systems of digital writing that are going on underneath the surface. Everything we see on the internet, says Sandy Baldwin, is writing. Every file, every window, every app on every device is writing. As in the Matrix, the image that we see, even the images of letters and commas and full stops, represents digital writing. Writing, in that respect, it's worth noting, didn't begin with the alphabet. It began with notches and knots, notched wood, quipus, knotted pieces of string, colored string, that was read with practiced motions of the hand, rather like Braille. So before text, there was textiles. Many forms of writing have no reference whatsoever to the human voice. Think about seismographs, musical notation, think about circuit diagrams, knitting patterns. So this isn't entirely new. Writing now begins with noughts and ones, digital writing. The network set up by the social industry did offer to make up for something else, which was a massive decline in social interactions measurable on several indices. A decline in dating, a decline in pub attendance, a decline in the kinds of drug use that required social interaction, like booze and fags, for example. And one of Twitter's founders suggested that where people felt alone, where they were in crisis, where, for example, an earthquake had struck, or God knows, a pandemic, here was this network that would substitute for society. So the Twittering machine was born just as neoliberal capitalism 1.0 entered an historic crisis. I say this right now, we're living through a crisis that makes that one look like a tea party. Nonetheless, it also came along and it accelerated a crisis of inherited political authority, destroying the authority of journalists and news media and sucking revenues out of the dying print empires. It ended the old one-way traffic of ideological meaning, where essentially you would have ideology broadcast at you by the television or by newspapers, and you didn't really have much of a say in it. At the same time, because capital's crisis and the concomitant austerity measures that were implemented by many governments meant that there was a lot less communal stuff available, and much fewer jobs, especially if you were young. A lot less public services, less libraries, and so on. The industry offered, in place of that, an abundance of seemingly free stuff, and it also offered various apps and ways in which you could say, adapt to this new situation. It offered TaskRabbit, Uber, Airbnb, commodify every last bit of spare time, every spare room, commodify your car if you've got a car that you only use a little bit, and so on, in order to make up for lost income. We are not the consumers. We know this by now. It's legendary. We're not voters in a cyber democracy. What we are is lab rats and wage laborers. We are the product. So we're in this new type of political economic organization that's neither a state nor a market. And the industry, it's quite redolent in some ways of Adorno's culture industry. Adorno described an industry that essentially integrates us from above, that inculcates on us quite conservative habits of thinking, the good guy, the bad guy, all these really stale and cliched ways of thinking about social life. Adorno's argument was that this was producing new types of conformity and new types of captivity. Well, the social industry is actually, in some ways, much more advanced, because while Adorno might have exaggerated the uniformity of the culture industry, what we can say about the social industry is that it's all scripted. It's very carefully written out for us. Of course, there's, as Benjamin Bratton put it, a liberty of ends, in that we can use it for whatever we like, but there is a tyranny of means. So it's a strange new techno-political regime, because it combines the surveillance powers of states with the market control of big business empires, with the ideological power of mass media. In fact, we have to say, it's probably even more sophisticated in terms of ideological domination than mass media, for a number of reasons. First of all, it has no ideological agenda. It's not out to convince you of anything. It's in the reality shaping business. It shapes how we perceive and experience reality, but it doesn't tell us what to think. And when we're writing, or even when we're just clicking or scrolling, we're writing in the language of data, whether we know it or not. And of course, we can, as I say, use it for any means we like. We can write to anyone we like. We can write to celebrities, jihadists, porn stars, royals, exes that we don't like, and so on. And we ultimately are really writing to the machine. Whoever we choose to address, we're confessing our secrets to this machine. And it takes a copy of the message for its own purposes and then passes it on. So just think about that in subjective psychoanalytic terms. If your interaction is really with a machine, we want to think about what that implies about the kinds of subjective states that are produced. What's our incentive to participate in this industry? One answer for this is addiction. So ex-social industry bosses often give us these guilty confessionals wherein they say, we set up a machine that was designed to get people addicted, and what it does is that it administers these little dopamine boosts. So whenever you see the notifications, the bright red notifications on your Facebook thing saying you've got 26 new notifications to look at, that's the equivalent of a clickbait headline that says you won't believe what all these people are saying about you. Now, as it happens, neuroscientists will tell you dopamine doesn't give you a high, it doesn't work that way. And in fact, if you try to think about addiction, reducing it to a chemical process is no more sensible than reducing love to a chemical process. To do that bypasses the whole question of meaning. Then there's also in fact, if you think about it, addiction can be regarded as a form of misplaced love for perhaps the wrong thing, which arises whenever our loves in the real world, as it were, disappoint us. So we are addicted, devoted to a furnace of meaning. The semantic onslaught of information never selects for accuracy, it selects for semantic impact. A volatile combination of a stock market of sentiments, 24-hour news, and neighborhood watch, dominated by the networks of media firms, politicians, marketing and PR agencies, corporations, micro-celebrities and macro-celebrities, and of course, Russian bots and so on, who make up most of the traffic. They talk of freedom of information as the ultimate good. Information is never actually free. It is a system of controls and surveillance. Freedom of information or speech is the industry's code for its monopoly over content, which must never be challenged by users or regulators. The mass production of information, now more than ever before, makes the world more enigmatic than it was. Information is revenge porn. Information is doxing. Information is Tommy Robinson videos, so-called fake news. Information is necrotic. Study after study suggests that time on the social industry is correlated to increased depression, self-harm, and suicidal behavior. But if we weren't already more depressed than we've been for a while, which all data suggests, would this be our remedy? And would the red pill be the powerful antidepressant that it so palpably is for so many young white men? We go on the machine ostensibly because we're lonely and depressed. It offers us an addictive remedy which makes us more lonely and depressed. The social industry is a chronophage. It is a monster that eats time. If you ever visit the Corpus Clock in Cambridge, you'll see the monster sitting on top of the wheel, turning the wheel of time and snapping its jaws open and shut to consume each passing second. An industry that monetizes time on device, as the gambling industry calls it, replaces the tick of the clock with the click of keys and the tap of thumbs.
Seymour says Twittering machine has no innate morality, but it takes advantage of our weakness to monopolize our attention and change our behavior. We are so bewildered that we are constantly wary of announcing news and unnecessary letters, ready to continue the trivial of clicking the like button and surrender to advertisers who collect the personal data we provide without guilt. But in fact, we all enjoy it. We browse the latest news of our friends through social media, and I recommend it to the delicious restaurant, or enjoy the beauty of the trip posted by our friends. In the busy life, we can't meet every friends, but we can still keep an eye on each other. In addition, the network also shortens the distance between us and the superstars. In the past, not every fan could go to the concert of their favorite stars. Now they can sit at home and log on to YouTube and watch them. Moreover, through social media such as Twitter, they can easily learn about the daily lives of stars and interact with them. Although the internet occupies most of people's leisure times, it greatly enriched this time. In the past, we might watch TV. With the advent of our internet, we have the opportunity to understand a more colorful world and expand our horizon and meet different people online. For a vertical point of view, an increase in science and technology has two sides. Cars bring the convenience of transportation and reduce unnecessary travel time, but the exhaust they emit will pollute the environment. With the development of the way of information transmission, people become closer. Since ancient time, the purpose of killing time is to play and enjoy. From the earliest bonfire parties to the later board game and cards, finally to participating in all kinds of social media interactions. People are all trying to kill time. Therefore, social media cannot be judged by whether it's good or bad, but by how people use it. Only when people use it well can it promote social progress. Otherwise, it will do harm to society. Ancient weapons were first used in hunting animals as well as in conflicts between humans. If weapons are used well, they will help mankind survive. But if weapons are not used well, they will lead to aggression and destruction.